Hey guys, Aaron here. So in today's video, we're going to go over how to properly patch a ceiling here. Now, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you get notified as soon as we put out a new video. Let's get to it. We had a small leak in the shower and we couldn't find it. So today we're just going to show you how to properly repair this. It's not super difficult. It just takes a little time. Now, I will say, if you do have a ceiling leak, something like this, it's always a good idea to actually cut it out in a square. That way it's easier to patch. We're going to put some board up here, and then we can just cut out a square piece and fill that in. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to measure this. I got 6.5 here. I got 5.5 on the other side. And of course, I'm going to measure my length. And I'm at 28 3/4. Now, this doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to mud around this and you're going to tape it. So if you're 1/4 of an inch in on all the sides, it's not a problem. Even probably more than that, even if you're a 1/2 inch, it's not going to be a problem. But you really just want something that'll fill up this hole and stay in there and that you can mud and tape. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this measurement from here to here and I'm going to add about 2 inches to it, and I'm going to cut a piece of 1x or even plywood, something like that, to set up here so that I have something to screw the drywall to. Now, I don't recommend using another piece of drywall because the screws will not hold and they'll just spin and it won't actually hold the drywall. So I always recommend a piece of 1x or maybe even plywood, something that's solid that you can actually screw into. Now, let's go ahead and take our board here and we're just gonna slide it up in here like that. And we're just going to set it right there. And again, depending on what kind of board you use and how wide it is, you can leave an inch or so hanging off, and that gives you an inch to screw the drywall in. But it's not that big a deal. You just want to make sure you have enough room to screw it to the ceiling. I'm going to take our drywall screws here. You want to make sure you sink these far enough that you can actually cover them. Now, because this is a textured ceiling and I'm going to tape this, I'm actually going to get some of that texture off where I'm going to put the tape at. And this is just going to allow that tape to sit a little bit better. Makes a bit of a mess, but it doesn't have to be perfect. But I'm going to get a little of it off. Now we can go ahead and cut our piece of drywall here. So here we got 6.5. Then we're going to go 28. And down 28.5 or 28 3/4. And then we're going to mark it at 5.5. Now you could definitely take your drywall square, just run down, cut a straight line. I'm not going to do that because then I got to cut a little piece off. So what I'm actually going to do is take my straight edge, put it on there, and I come down here. I'm just going to cut it at a little bit of an angle. Pull that out, pop that. And I'm going to double check my mark here. I'm going to verify 28 3/4. My straight edge here. And I can snap this here. Now we can verify it fits up here. Make any adjustments we need to. Now, like I said, you get a little gap here, but I don't think it's a problem. But if somebody else disagrees, let me know in the comment section. All right, now I'm just going to mix up some 20-minute mud and put on here. So let's get to that. The reason I chose 20-minute mud is I wanted to set up a bit faster, and I don't want as much shrinking. I'm also going to mix this up a bit thicker so that I can fill in those gaps. Now I'm just going to take my 6-inch knife and again fill in. And again, I cut it. I wanted it thicker so that it doesn't drip on me. Then we can take our mesh tape, put it right over we'll take our mesh tape, put it right over our seams there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let this sit for about 20 minutes and then I'll come back for the second coat. All right, so now we'll go ahead and start mixing up our second coat here. This is going to be, again, I'm going to use the 20-minute mud. It's going to be a thinner coat than I did on the first time. So add a little bit more water, and I won't need as much because I'm not filling in as many holes. Now, if you put a little bit too much water in there, it's not a big deal. You can either put a little bit more mud in there or just let it sit for a few minutes and it'll dry out a little bit. Just keep stirring it around and it'll start to dry out. But really, I'm just kind of looking for like a peanut butter texture. Now, if this was a bigger section, I would go with a bigger knife, but I'm going back to my 6-inch knife. Now I'm going to leave this for about 20 minutes. I'll come back and I'll wet sand the edges here to kind of blend it in, knock down any high spots so that I can put my skim coat on and it won't catch and I won't get any chunks in my last and final coat because I want that to be smooth. And then when that's all said and done, I'll come back and texture it. All right, so we're pretty well set up, dry to the touch. I'm going to take my sanding sponge here, just kind of go over my edges here. Knock down any high spots, try to blend this a little bit on the edges as much as I can, which I'll do again on the skim coat. All right, then I'm going to take my knife, just lightly go over and knock down any high spots here. You can let it dry a little longer if you want. Give it time to set up. Knock down any high spots. Now for my skim coat, I'm just using some all-purpose USGA. I throw a little water in there just to get the bubbles out and get it a little bit smoother. This is going to take quite a bit longer to dry and set up, so I am going to leave this overnight. I'll come back tomorrow and do my texture. Now I'm using my 6-inch knife again. And that's because, again, this is because it's a small patch. If it were larger, I'd definitely use my 12-inch. This one you're just going to pull it tight. Get those bubbles out. There you go. We just want to fill on any little holes or anything like that. Like I said, we'll come back and now I like to do that before it dries, just so I can blend this in just a little bit there on the edges, but you'll never notice it. All right, so we let this sit for 24 hours, and that was because it wasn't all-purpose mud. So now let's just go back and knock the high spots here. I'm going to sand it as well. But what I want to do now, before I texture this, I want to blend in my corners. So I'm going to take a wet sponge here and just kind of go along here, along the edges, knock down any high spots I can, try to match that. Then I'm just going to let that dry a little bit and then come back to the sanding sponge. Sand down these spots here. When it's a little wet like that, the nice part is you don't get a lot of dust. But you don't want it real wet, you just want it a little wet. Now we're just going to test out our ceiling texture. And I do recommend testing it first, so at least you understand how much is going to come out, because it does come out pretty quick. Shake it up real good. Now this will make a pretty big mess, so if you can cover stuff up, it's a good idea to cover up your floor or whatever. Then you go back and forth. We're going to let this sit for 24 hours. We'll come back, prime it, and then paint it. If you prime it before, you're going to have to let the primer dry, and then you can come back and do this, and it turns into a much longer process. So again, texture it, come back, prime it, paint it.